Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy guest client show. This is kind of an expose of the people that I've worked with in the past and what they're doing, where they were before I met them, and how far they've come. This particular individual, you would never know how old he is by looking at him. He looks like he's 16 still, but he's not. But he's as genius as a 16-year-old. He doesn't have all the preconceived world opinions. He's just a curious George. Except for his name's Frank, can I tell him your real name, Frank?
Yeah, you can tell me with the tea and crumpets and everything involved in it.
He would have to tell you his full name because I don't know how to say his middle name, but Francis Wazeter, but we call him Frank for short. Yeah. And he's awesome. Honestly, one of the best digital strategists that I know, and I'm excited to have him share more about his journey, what he's doing, and how you can join him on that journey. Because if you've ever wondered, like, why have my own website? Why have my own real estate? Like, what's the value in it? Those questions are going to be answered today. And you're going to want to go talk to him and have a conversation with him for sure. So, but really quick, Frank, how did we even first meet? Like, tell them the story of how you first met me and like what your initial thoughts were when you saw, oh, there's Sam. Either initially when you first met me or when you first saw me speak or saw me as somebody who could maybe benefit you in a certain way.
Sure. Oh, and the full name, for those that are curious, is Francis Xavier Wazeter IV. So, it's plenty long. Got plenty of royalty in the name is the joke. So, when we first met, I was living in New York at the time, and I had flown out to Utah to do an event. I think at the time that was like the Next Gen marketing event, I believe it was. And I remember you were an audience member at the time, and I remember like you were one of the people, because I think that was my first presentation in Utah. And afterwards, you came up with like 1,001 questions coming up, and which was fantastic because usually people just kind of take in information and just, they don't further qualify it or delve deeper into it. But like you were super excited to talk about a topic that you didn't even necessarily know about at the time. But like you seem to understand the concept right away. Like you understand like why it was beneficial to you to have a website and to be out there, even though like even within your field, a lot of the people, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like I think one of the initial conversations that you had was a lot of the other people in your field kind of shy away from it. And they don't necessarily try to use that and leverage that portion of it. And I just remember having the conversation with, well, yeah, you could actually, leverage in a way in your field because so many others shy away from it. You could really make yourself unique and set yourself up, as a much more, successful market leader rather than just following everyone else. And I remember the conversations kind of started from there. And then, I know as when we actually came to Utah, like initially I was like super suspicious of you. Like this guy, I was just like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know how much I can trust this guy, he's bringing in, some, I remember some conversations where, like someone that we know, like mutually, like with Travis, I'm like, I don't know, this guy's, he's kind of, I'm getting like these, the New York style, like, I can't trust you kind of vibes. Because, usually in the context of New York, when people like talk the way you do, you're like, okay, what are you trying to scam me into? because it's such a cutthroat environment. And then I know that, like, through getting to know you and working closely with you, at the end, I'm like, I really like Sam's, Sam's legit. Like Sam, like the conversations where we're able to have are at such a higher level than, other people, related to anything, finance or, money oriented. Like, you got this kind of real and raw approach to things that, what I find is, through the course of working through thousands and thousands of professionals in their various fields, that most people are not very good at their job. And, so it's kind of startling when you think that, the career that most people have chosen in life, they're not very good at it. And one of the things that I've admired the most about through this process of getting to know you now, like through like 2 years, something like that, is that you're always looking for different strategies to help your clients and looking, like for different insights. And I remember, the first meeting that we had, like, I didn't really want to talk with you at all. And, you handed me this thin book and I'm like, okay, well, I know better than this. This is, I was putting up every objection I could possibly put up just because I'm like, I don't, I like books that are like this. They gave me a book that was like this. And I was like, well, that's crap. But you said one thing, and that was, what if you could keep your money invested in the market and still use it for cash flow? Well, I said, that is something I'm interested in. That's something that I'm interested in. And that kind of led me down a rabbit hole where, we kind of invented this whole new, like, small business cash flow model that would have never happened had we not had that conversation. Then, of course, after that, it was all, sunshines and roses. And, it's like me, I go to war with Sam any day.
That's awesome. That's funny. It's funny that I had, like, the initial concept. This is why I just need to know Frank, honestly. Frank takes any idea that you think is like, oh, this is a good idea. And honestly, and frankly, when I talk to most people, my level of thought is, there's whichever way it works for you, either too high up in the clouds or way too underground for most people to comprehend what's going on. And that's not to, like, say that anybody's dumb. It's just most people don't think that deeply about things, and they don't, like, let their mind just marinate on an idea for long enough. Well, that's what other people's experience of me is. Then you go meet Frank, and Frank is definitely 10xing his genius gene and finding things that many people haven't ever thought about, haven't ever considered. And it's not just in finance, obviously. And he's right. I gave him a book that's maybe a half inch. I don't even think it's a half inch. It's probably like 3/6.
Perfect book for most people.
It's the purpose of the book. It's called How Money Works, Stop Being a Sucker. And the purpose of the book is to take sophisticated financial concepts, because many financial concepts are a little bit deeper and they take a little bit more expansive understanding. Take those and water them down to a comic book 6th grade education level, and still be able to have you end with the same result of knowing what's going to be best for you. And it's different for everybody. It's not pushing you in one direction or another. It's actually understanding why we need financial literacy. 68% of Americans are financially illiterate, meaning they can't read or write. And so it's really to solve that area. But Frank reads books that are like 2.5 or 3 inches long, and it's like Chinese if you don't understand finances. Good luck understanding all the acronyms and the abbreviations and what they're saying, and once you learn what everything means, how it relates to everything else. But if you think that's difficult in finance, okay, because finance can be a little difficult of an area, that's not really what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is digital strategy. And if you think finance is complicated, then the nice thing about financial rules is they're pretty consistent. And Frank, you would agree, right? The financial rules in general, the mathematics behind how different investments work, how finances work, is pretty consistent across the last 2 centuries.
Yeah, the great thing about finance is that once you understand a couple core concepts, everything else is just a different expression of those core concepts. So it's looking at numbers is intimidating for people, but it's not. Once you kind of understand, once you understand the concept of compound interest, that just basically everything is just how can I get more of that? You can boil it down to just how do I compound my money, and everything else is just whether it's stocks, whether it's real estate, whether it's bonds, whatever your gold, whatever your flavor of investment happens to be. You're just saying, okay, well, what's the vehicle that's going to get me the most compound interest, and then what's the vehicle that's going to save me the most on tax? And what's that strategy kind of marinate through? And to that effect, like I got to say, like I'm probably one of the toughest sales to make in terms of like a client, because it doesn't matter who you are, no matter whatever you say to me, I'm going to go and I'm going to research 10 ways from Sunday, and I'm either going to call you on your shit, or I'm going to say, okay, great, you're legitimate, you're like this is a good fundamental strategy. And that was one of the things that I always liked about Sam, is that, like everything that he said, I could go off and try to debunk it 10 ways from Sunday, and it still came back consistently to be true and viable. So
yeah, that's awesome. But think about that. How is that comparative to digital strategy? Because I think this is my perspective, right? And I'm not the expert, Frank is. That's why he's on here. But there's like the core concepts of digital strategy that are essential to know and basic. But what's different, I feel, about digital strategy versus the financial realm, and this is, again, from a novice perspective, but the algorithm changes, the things that people are looking for, they change at a much more rapid rate. Even the way, like processing, I mean, Java's been around for a while, but even the way that people code changes at a much more rapid rate than financial products, institutions, the way money works. Money works pretty much, compound interest is how money works. I mean, like on the simplest thing, if you understand that concept, you can apply it to value of exchange, income, like you can apply it to everything, and that basically tells you where you need to go. Digital, I don't feel is the same as easy. And maybe it's because my mind doesn't work that way, but expound on that. Why is it changing so rapidly? And why is it important to have somebody who is an expert in that rather than just trying to wing it?
Yeah. So fundamentally, for me to do what I do, creating, websites, putting together digital strategies, basically, fundamentally, it's the art of kind of business development in the context of the internet. For me to do just the basic job, okay, the basic job requires me knowing at minimum 5 different languages, 5 different programming languages. And when I say, so it's kind of like the equivalent of saying that for you to go out and to have a conversation with someone in real life, you need to know 5 actual languages. So it's like if you went on the street, you'd have to know Russian, Japanese, Spanish, French, and English in order just to do, just to communicate with somebody. So this is like the fundamental part of it. And most entrepreneurs and most people just aren't going to have the time to keep up with that, because the internet is evolving at a pace that is enormously rapid. Sam, you touched on the fact that these algorithms change on a regular basis, and that number, like for example, Google's search algorithm changed 3,456 times last year alone. That's more than 10 times a day. More than 10 times a day, that algorithm changed. So if you're trying to do this DIY kind of SEO thing, you don't 3,400 changes, you got no chance. You got no chance. No chance if you're going to do that and, go through and do all these other things that are required.
Actually run a business.
Yeah.
On top of learning all that.
It's crazy. No, don't get me wrong. Most of those changes are small tweaks, adjustments, things like this. But fundamentally, you're always looking at a moving target. And you're always trying to aim up the shot and hit this moving target. that you don't know where it's going to be, where it's going to pop up. And all the best that you can do is come up with best practices that will work. So, people constantly ask, like, what can I do with Facebook to make that better? What can I do? I should be on Facebook. Should I have this thing called a landing page? Should I be on LinkedIn? Should I do Instagram? Should I do TikTok? Should I do this SEO thing? Should I do, Twitter and tweets? And do I buy leads? Do I, get on directory listings? And this list is 3,000 miles long. And if you listen to any different experts, they're all going to have some different mix of using these things. And fundamentally, what it comes down to is you need to understand what each tool is for. So you've got traffic assets. In other words, things that you do because they have eyeballs. This is the equivalent of saying, I'm going to open up a business on Main Street because Main Street gets more physical traffic coming through with it. Therefore, I can get more exposure to people as they're driving on by, right? That's why you'd pay higher rents, to be on a major thoroughfare, a major road versus being on some bumpkin off-road somewhere, right? Because more people come through that, so it has more value. So when you think of social media, your Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever flavor of the month comes up there, those are main roads. Their only purpose is to get traffic and to get exposure to you. Now, your website is a different purpose. This is like you're actually owning property. This is where you can get people to come in and build a loyal following that's only seeing you, not you, and then, dog, cat, funny videos, political discourse or whatever. When you scroll through your Facebook feed, you're like, oh, look, hey, that's interesting from Frank. And then, oh, look, a kitten. Yay, how cute, how great it is, and instantly distracted and gone. So where people get messed up is that social media is usually like a faster dopamine hit because they already have the audience. They already have 1 billion people with access to it. So you'd be an idiot to not embrace these things and just be like, yeah, I don't want to have, access to all these users. But when it comes to your website doesn't start off with that. It starts off with a goose egg. It starts off with 0. So you've got to build that up. But the content you put on your website is there pretty much forever until you take it down. So you could make, for example, a post on your website, and someone 5 years from now could find that post and say, I'm going to go and do business with you now based on the work that you did 5 years ago. So if we're going to relate it to finances, your website's your compound interest. That's how you scale up and compound interest. Your social media is kind of like, it's got a compound interest effect to it. You get followers, you get, things like that going on. But Facebook's, and whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it is, their objective is to keep you on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever it is, because that's how they make their money. They make their money through getting advertisement based on how many users are sitting there on that. And by the way, social media sites, they're websites. So like when you say, hey, websites don't work, it's like, well, Facebook's a website. It's a very complicated website, but Facebook's a website. Facebook's multi-billion-dollar business is a website. So and where that gets complicated is people want things like immediate. Like when you start investing in anything, it's like, I can't expect to be a millionaire putting $100 into the stock market and be like, oh yeah, great. I started, fantastic. It takes time and years to build that up. And this website that works the same way. And where it gets really complicated is that there's a mathematical component where there's certain technical things that have to happen from a programmatic point of view for Google or Facebook to read your website, because they're programs, they're not people. So for example, there's a subset of a programming language called JSON-LD, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And this is how the databases of the internet basically read the information that you've put on your website. So if you don't have JSON-LD on your website, and if you don't have certain meta tags on your website, you're not going to get a Facebook preview thumbnail. You're not going to get a snippet on there. So when you share your link, it's just going to show a blank link, right? Versus having like a preview image, having like a preview of the text versus like having author information, website information, all this like rich data as it's called. And the same thing works in search. If you're wondering how like some search results come back with like this wonderful, like, you know, the preview of the content, it's all powered by JSON LD. And if you don't have JSON LD, which is a very technical thing on your website, you have zero chance of that ever occurring, period, because you didn't have that technical part in place. So there's this whole list from website speed to JSON LD to like just how everything is programmed and everything like that, that is required for you to actually gain traffic and organic search results. But then on the other hand, you have the emotions. So you have mathematics and emotions. And if and the emotions is your content. If your content isn't good and valuable, if it's not engaging, if it's not multimedia oriented, if it's not providing value that someone wants to read, watch, or listen to, then none of the technical stuff matters, because people see it, they bounce off. Google gets the stats and said, hey, they looked at this. Like Google literally has so many stats on the thing that they can say, well, when somebody clicked on that link, they left after 2 seconds, which means that content's not valuable, which means we shouldn't bother to rank that. So if your content's not valuable, it's not going to work. So you've got to combine this art of sales and value and emotion and, you know, the psychology of people to people, the emotion side of it, and you have to have the mathematics, the technical side all in place in order for you to have a prayer's chance in hell, you know, like a snowball's chance in hell of actually getting anywhere with it. And this is why most people throw up their hands and they go, I can't even make this work.
Right. And that happens to business owners, which is really unfortunate. So why would it be important? Obviously, I think there's no question. If you own a business, even if it's self-employed, even if you are owning, like you're part of a bigger company. So let's say you work with a multi-level marketing company like doTERRA or LuLaRoe, Herbalife, whatever. So let's say you work with inside of a multi-level marketing company and they have their website. You still need your own personal website. Then there's other people who are part of brokerage models, like a loan officer, a real estate agent, lawyers, things of that area where they don't have their own website. They just go off the company website. They have their little link inside of a company website. And then there's people who work with franchises, right? You'll have a franchise. Does the North Orem McDonald's have its own website, the guy who owns it, or does he just go off the corporate website? Has he ever even thought about marketing for his store on for his McDonald's, right? He gets tons of other traffic, but what if he had a YouTube marketing thing? I don't know. but point is, every business, doesn't matter what industry you're in, every business needs a website. But what's the argument for having individuals at the very minimum own their name on Google, but even more have at least a landing page? Like, what's the value there for just some random nobody, stay-at-home mom, or I say nobody, but they just don't have anything going on? Why is it valuable for them to still have a website?
So I can answer this in the context of even just employment. Let's say that you are looking for just a better corporate job. You're just, you know, that's your path. That's the way you want to go. You know, fantastic. You know, this is the use case where you would say that a website would probably be the most useless. Why would somebody looking for, you know, a better job ever have a site, right? You know, so when there's like a LinkedIn profile, there's a Facebook profile, you know, hey, I've got my resume, I'm sending out a piece of paper. It all comes down to differentiation and how you want to be treated and get better opportunities. So at minimum, to have a website on the internet, you need to be spending at least like $150 a year. You know, you got to pay for your name, right? You need to have ownership of that. And you need to pay for the hosting fees. So at minimum, you're looking at about $150 a year. And that by itself, saying if I have a basic website up there, you are already more serious at whatever it is that you do compared to somebody who only has a LinkedIn profile or a Facebook page or just like a piece of paper resume, because there's no cost associated with that. Everybody can have one for free. So you can say whatever you want on the LinkedIn page, but generally speaking, when you've already put an investment into having some kind of basic site, you're already taken more seriously and positioned more as a leader, because that required money and investment and more time. So you're probably more legitimate in what you're saying. So if one of the things that we do constantly is we're evaluating and studying market leaders and market leadership, because there's this profound case where market leaders not only dominate their markets, whether that's on a local or national scale, by taking the majority of the revenue, but they also are the most insulated against economic recession, times of uncertainty, and things like that. It's people on the fringe that suffer the most. And the market leaders usually are the ones that are able to thrive, continue to build their wealth, and continue to grow. And every single market leader has their own website and their own experience specific to them, where they're promoting something like this. Like you take a figure, for example, like an Ed Milet. And Ed Milet has his own personal branded website. And Ed Milet doesn't get to be Ed Milet without that. Like he would be taken considerably less seriously if he didn't even have that basic investment going through. If he just had a YouTube channel, if he just had a LinkedIn channel, like it's not this big impact. I mean, like how seriously do you take, like, for example, you could follow someone on YouTube and say, yeah, they've got a lot of followers and the content that they're saying makes a lot of sense. But when you investigate that, further, you're going to take them a little bit less seriously subconsciously when they don't even have some kind of basic site out there, or the site that you get to is just some like bland corporate like about page that everybody else has. There's no differentiation there. So when you're studying the habits of these people and these organizations that become infinitely successful, it's really the one common denominator in their digital strategy is always the website. And even if that's the case where you're saying, all I want in life is a better corporate job and better opportunities, like when everybody else is just sending in a resume and saying, here's a LinkedIn page, when you say, here is my web page with a video introduction of me and like the case studies and examples and maybe even a couple of blog posts about my thoughts and my perspectives, you are instantly elevated way up here. Like you instantly just like, you are now seen as more credible, more experienced, and more, like adept at what you're doing, because you've taken that little bit of extra effort just to have something there. And you need to fundamentally own your name. Like you need to have, firstname, lastname.com if lastname.com isn't available. You need to own that in the context of your personal brand, because you never know. Like you're not going to necessarily change your name, at least on a somewhat regular basis, and you never know what you're going to need it for. So like for $12 a year and like $100 a year, $12 a year for the domain name, $100 a year for the hosting, you get to own your identity on the internet and control the conversation around that. So when your employer decides to Google search you, because that's what they're going to do, don't be naive. Like they're going to look, if it's for any significant job whatsoever, they're going to Google search you. And what do you want them to see? Do you want them to see like a Facebook post about all the crap that you're talking about and going through? Or do you want a controlled, concise experience with a website where it puts you in the best light?
Yeah.
And so the quickest path to consistency and wealth generation, whether that's small business, whether that's employment, whether that's you as an authority in your field, is through the website, because it's the fastest legitimizer on the planet.
And I completely agree. It's funny, when I was going through school, I went to Salt Lake Community College, and this was one of the things that they made us all do. And I was like, this is so dumb. Why am I doing this? So my first website, I don't even think it's active anymore because I only used it for school, but I think it was on like a Jimdo website. You've probably heard of them, but they made like part of their general education at Salt Lake Community College was everybody had to they had to create a website, like create an online, essentially resume. But then for every class that you had to have another page for that class, and you had to have uploaded. So every class that you took at Salt Lake Community College when I was there, one of the course requirements was that you had to upload a project, a paper, a math assignment, a whatever, onto that website, so that as you go through your 4-year degree or your 2-year degree, if you took 10 classes, well, how many is that? 4 classes a semester times 4. So like 16, 17 classes, then you would have all of your work online. So not only and then you had your resume, you had pictures of where you traveled to, like they wanted it to be a pretty fleshed out thing. And I definitely took it for granted. It's just like, this is dumb. So I only learned the bare minimum. I wish I would have spent more time, but it did help me understand, now that I have been working with Frank and with his team to build out my own website, I'm a little bit more aware of like what actually goes on the back window of like all the different languages. Because this is the thing, Frank, when he shows you your website, he shows you an actual website, and then you're like, well, can we change this? And then he pulls open the actual numbers and letters and whatever crap it is that actually tells your website to look the way it does. And he's like, for us to change that, it will take rewriting this piece of code. That's not a short thing. Don't ever play in this window, because if you miss one piece of code, then I have to go through and pour over your whole script of code to find the one thing that you screwed up. That's a needle in a haystack, especially with like ones and zeros and exclamation points and apostrophe, because they all have actual meaning in computer dialect, different than they do in English. So that was the one thing that I thought was interesting, is that we actually had to get that experience, and then once we got that experience, I just discounted it for like 2 or 3 years. But really, it's so valuable to have that experience. And the other thing, and I'll let him answer this, right? But Google, if you buy your domain on google.com, even if you don't buy your domain on Google, you can get it from anywhere else and forward it to it. But Google Sites, it's not the most sophisticated hosting solution, okay? But Google lets you host a website that's drag and drop, and it's not a terrible website, for free. So really, if you wanted just a basic landing page type website, you could do that for $12-15 a year, right?
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have to you don't necessarily have to go into like the depths of the code, like, because Sam was saying, there are like, the most important thing is step one is, if you don't have a website, get a website. Get something up. Like, something up is better than, like, it's not going to be perfect by a long, your first site's never going to be perfect. And, like a website's never, ever done. So don't ever think it's like, oh, okay, great. I did all this work on it, great, it's done. We never have to look at this thing again. But, like Sam was saying, like, you can get a drag and drop templated site through like, Google, through Wix, through Squarespace, like, and have something that looks decently good enough, like, and just you put your information in, you're good. And like that kind of satisfies that initial requirement for, do I even have the site? And especially when you're like, hey, I don't have the time to like learn all this code. And that's not the thing that I would ever suggest anyone do, just because it's just such a rabbit hole that you're never going to get anywhere. But it's, like we're not in, 2005 when the only way to have a website was to be someone like me and manually code the whole thing. Like, you can get a basic, good looking site to do the basic job of it without knowing any of that. And, so it's like, if you don't have one, just get something started on that. Whether it's Google Sites, Wix, Squarespace, like WordPress, just get it done. And, because I promise, no matter what, when it grows and it needs to be retooled to be more of an asset, it's going to have to be redone anyway. And so I put this in the context of like Sam, like, let's say that you're hiring someone for your team, all right? And you've got 2 candidates that look relatively recently well on paper, and one has a website they link it to, and one just has the resume. Which one are you going to hire?
I'm the one with the website. And I'm literally thinking this. I had like a little daydream about, as he's talking, I'm thinking, this is what I need in my assistant. And so I'm like writing down qualities of what do I want for my assistant, because I'm looking at hiring an assistant. And this is absolutely like one of the things. I need an assistant who understands enough about a web presence that they can, as I live my life, they can be either sending the right information to Frank to put on my website, or just going in and throwing stuff up on my website that's relevant to what's going on in my life on a somewhat regular basis. And so I would never hire somebody at this point who doesn't know how to do that and is practicing it. This is a big thing, and I want you to talk about this too. How often do you run into people who say, I'm a digital strategist, I do marketing, but they say they do all this stuff, and then you're like, oh yeah, what's your website? And they're like, oh, I haven't got around to building it yet. And you're like, what? What do you mean? Like, don't profess you're doing something or can help me do something unless you can direct me to something that you've done it. Either you've done it and you're no longer doing it, which is fine. I'm okay with if you've already built multiple buildings and you're no longer building, but you're going to tell me how to build my house. That's different than somebody who's like, oh, well, you should build it this way, but they've never built anything. It's like, no, not going to take advice from there. So how often does that happen? And how do you detect that as a consumer who maybe wants a website built? Yeah, go into that a little bit. I know you have these frustrations, same as me.
So it's a little tough because it's kind of like this issue with the so the old allegory where the cobbler's kids have terrible shoes. And if you know what cobbler's the old school shoemaker, before we had the Nikes and all that kind of good stuff. So, cobbler would sell you shoes, make you shoes, right? And, so it's the example like, the mechanic that might work on supercars and he's driving out with a Pinto in the back, because he couldn't be bothered with the stuff. So, I mean, there is an element, don't get me wrong, of this craftsmanship where, digital marketers out there, digital strategists, can like legitimately get some good results and then have a terrible presence themselves. Like that certainly exists, but it's not a confidence builder. And it becomes very difficult to decide whether that person's actually going to be able to fulfill that job with you if they don't have an example where you can lead from. And it kind of comes down to, everyone had, Sam, so my parents used to say, don't do as I say, not as I do. Did your parents say that?
Yes. Yeah, often.
And, that's terrible advice because, you don't trust the opinion where they're saying, hey, do what I say and not what I do, right? Like you look at it, it's especially terrible advice in business. If someone's saying, hey, I can make you $1 million infrastructure on the internet, or I can get you this many followers, or I can do this, if they're making this big fat promise, and, they say in order for you to do that, you have to post daily on whatever it is, or you have to post once a week, or you have to do this, that, and the other. And if they're not doing that themselves, I mean, why aren't you following your own advice? Do you really believe in this, or are you just... Because if you fundamentally believe in something in business, then at some level you're doing that. And you have to be doing that. Otherwise, you're just not very legitimate. It's like I've seen so many people give speeches about Facebook marketing or website design and say, these are all the great things. And they may legitimately be an expert, but then you look at their own stuff and you're like, wow, you got 50 people that are following you. Why do I trust you, man? So you're the Facebook expert and you've got 50 people. Like, why wouldn't you build that asset for yourself? Like if this is fundamentally the way to create business in 2020, why aren't you doing it yourself? We call it in the industry leading by example, which I'm sure other industries call it that too. It's like, the person who's claiming to be a world-class website designer, and you go to it and it's like the worst thing that you've ever seen. You're like, really? Like, you just don't get high-level clientele that way. And if someone's not capable of pulling in high-level clientele, then do you really want to be doing business with them? Because, you need for it to work, for anything digital to work, because it's so complex, you need people that are intrinsically invested in your vision or what you're going to do and are capable of executing at that level, because otherwise you're just flushing money down the toilet. And if you don't find that person that instills that confidence, then you're not going to understand it and you're going to get frustrated. They're not going to be able to explain it in a way that you can understand. And the result and the sales aren't getting there. So you're just like, why am I spending, X amount of dollars, whether it's a dollar, $100,000, if it's not producing revenue, it's fundamentally flawed. So, it's the first area you got to look is, what are they doing for themselves? And if they're not doing anything for themselves, and then it tells you they're probably a one-man bandstand. They're probably going to be late on all the projects that they're delivering for you, and they're probably not going to be able to deliver to the level that you want because they're playing catch-up all the time. They're not delivering the results that they promised, period. End of story.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have this same problem, a different area, but same problem, right? So the same problem is exactly what you said: do as I say, not as I do. And I was having that problem with as I'm training other professionals in my industry. I was sitting there like, what are you doing with your time? Because for me, I know I screw off a lot. Like, if you're wondering what Sam's life looks like, I mean, you can look at my phone. It says I spend about 2.5 hours a day on social media every day. On average, I watch anywhere from 3 to 4 hours of Netflix every night. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, whatever we decide we're watching that night. And then on top of that, I still am spending, on average, 3 to 4 hours with my kids and my family every day. And so I know how much time I'm not working, but because I was running this problem, is the people I was training, they're trying to do what I do. My level of effort, because I was not working very hard, my level of effort, and get my same results, and it wasn't working. And for me, just saying, hey, do what I did when I started, that wasn't working either. And so we started tracking. For the last month, we tracked what is everybody doing on a daily basis. Like, so we have all these key indicators we're tracking. And for me, what I'm committing to do is I'm taking, hey, what's the highest category that each person has in this? And my goal now is, how can I consistently do what everybody else is doing at the highest level? So maybe one person's making more calls than the other person. So I've got to match whoever's making the most calls. I've got to match or do better than whoever's setting the most appointments. I've got to match or do better than whoever's doing the most appointments. I've got to match or do better than whoever's submitting the most business. I've got to match or do better than whoever's getting paid the most in my team, so that I'm constantly being the best in every category, so that I can actually lead. And that was hard for me, because it means that I had to give up some of my freedom of doing whatever I want, whenever I want, and I have to be a little bit more focused. Which, if you know Sam, he struggles with focus. I'm good for maybe an hour with one-on-one with somebody, and then I got to go do something else, or change the conversation, change who I'm talking to. I am like ADD, not like Frank. Frank can, like, he gets an idea, he'll stay up 30 hours, just like, this is what I said at the beginning. Like, he takes an idea that's fairly deep thought, and then he fixates on it, has sex with it, like, just really, really, really enjoys this idea to the point where he doesn't get any sleep until he gets to a point where he's satisfied. Like, and a lot of people will think, well, that's kind of stupid, or that's a waste. But you need more friends like Frank, who are brilliant and have that ability. I don't have that ability. It takes me 7 minutes to drive from my house to my office. Today, my phone was dead. And I was like, what am I supposed to do for the next 7 minutes? I can't listen to anything. I don't like listening to the radio. So I just sat there in silence for 7 minutes. But, like, the 7 minutes was a constant, like, check my phone. Even though I know it's dead, I still check it 2 or 3 times, because it's so habitual into my life of distraction. So, and anyways, that's crazy. But somebody could have said that about you, looked at you and said, where the heck are you, Frank? Just recently. What was the purpose of that? Because I don't know if you guys watched, if you don't know this story, then go look it up on Instagram, Fit to Fat to Fit, or Fit to Fat to Fit. And this guy, he was a he was a health coach, and he wasn't understanding how he could help his clients because he was always fit. It was like natural, and that's what everybody told him. Oh, you just don't know what it's like to be somebody who has all these cravings or whatever because you've been working out for so long. And he's like, that's bogus, that's bogus. Well, finally, he decided, and he was on Dr. Oz, he was on tons of stuff. He decided for I don't even know how long, maybe 3 months, just to eat crappy food, just to eat and live a life, not work out, live a life like his clients typically live their lives for a certain period of time. And then he went from this terrible position, got to the point where the doctors were telling him, if you don't change your life, you're going to die, right? And this guy was previously like an Olympian athlete, not an actual Olympics, but a men's physique person. He's very fit, goes to where, man, you're going to die if you don't change some things. And then he pulled himself out of that. And now if you go look at him, he looks like a freaking great God still. So good for him. But Frank, what was your journey like? Like, what was the process and what was the intention behind it?
Yeah. So, our strength is always in the digital realm. Like, I was making websites that were getting, tens of thousands of views back in 2000, so, for me, like there was always a certainty behind, if I put X effort into Y website, it's going to equal Z result. And it's just a matter of time. So I never had that fear of a result not coming through. And, so about 5 years ago, we started, Wazeter Inc. And, got it going through, like I'd already been in sales. I'd already, done these things. So, for me, my business journey to start was I made a couple phone calls, got my first couple clients, off to the races, got started. And one of the things that always come up is that, people would be looking at it and they'd be saying, well, I don't understand this process, because it's a long drawn out process. It's a long, with lots of different little factors that go in through that just fly over a lot of people's heads because they're just not around it every day. Because of course it would, right? And, as a business owner, it was hard for them to see value there. And then they would see, like, we had over a dozen companies that, we very formulaically, brought to their first $1 million in a year purely through website SEO and just, making the digital strategy make sense. The fastest one that we ever did was like 6 months. And so people would look at this and say, like, well, of course that strategy works for you because you've already got an audience, or you've already got, like this 1.2 million people following you on Quora. You've already got, like, you've been there, you've been established. You got started in, 2010 with some of this stuff. And, so of course you've got, you've got this advantage. Of course it works for you. I don't have that. I can't do it. My business is different. And one of my biggest pet peeves in life is when someone says my business is different and it doesn't work that way. And I'm like, no, like we've been doing this across, hundreds of different industries, like 90% of it's the same. Okay. I don't care if you're dealing with government contracts or like one-on-one coaching, like there's a lot of overlap there. So, we looked at it and we said, well, there's two numbers that we want. One, another pet peeve of mine was word of mouth. People would be like, I get business through word of mouth. And whenever you say word of mouth to me, that means you have zero clue how you're getting business. Zero clue. And you're like, oh yeah, great, I'm getting referrals and this is fantastic. And I'm like, well, that's not enough. Okay. Because when the economy seizes up, okay, like it has with COVID, referrals disappear. Like this all goes down. If you don't have a very, strong digital offense and a strong digital defense, you're going to be in that 100,000 restaurants that went out of business because they couldn't either A, have a $500 or less website, or B, add a little button that says call to order. You went out of business because you couldn't put a call to order button on there because you built your business through word of mouth. So one, I wanted to see exactly how much quantitatively word of mouth accounted for our business. And number two, I wanted to say, okay, I want to tear everything down, put myself in the shoes of how somebody is building without a website, without an internet presence, without any of these things. and see how that would affect the bottom line. And it was funny. So we took down the website. I literally stopped posting like everything on social media for like for a year. Okay. It took a year for my digital presence to evaporate, to go to zero, to like get, like I even went to the extent where I had to go get myself blacklisted in Google. I had to get my business page removed for like suspicious activity in order for my presence to go away. We went from ranking for thousands of keywords down to zero traffic, zero people. Went from 400 people a day seeing our stuff to zero. And that was a significant hit. So number one, we lost 60% of our gross new business because we no longer had a website. 60%. So after being in business for 5 years, having a great reputation, a world-class reputation, doing business with people that did like $6 billion Wall Street firms to like the Bernie Mac Foundation, we do business with the entire Greater Chicago, Business Association. So even though we already had this amazing roster of clientele, that was still only good for generating like 40% of our gross revenue through referral. So 60% was still people that didn't know us, knew we existed, and found value through our like blog posts, our services, found us organically through Google search, through digital means. 60%. And if in case it hasn't become clear, I like doing things differently. I like to break things and then reestablish them. So that way I can do them better, more consistently. And I'm okay with taking risks. I knew that this risk was going to happen, that we were going to have a significant decrease in new earnings because this was going to happen. And because of the way that we had our business set up, we're like, okay, we can survive with this. This will be fine. So now we're at the stage where after a year, it ended up actually being close to a year and a half for all of this stuff to go away, for us to totally destroy everything we had digitally. We're rebuilding from zero. And we're doing it in a YouTube series that's going to launch simultaneously with our blog and with the YouTube that's going to break down step by step exactly how and why we're doing these things, so you can follow the traffic line go and build up from this infrastructure that's zero to being $1 million producing infrastructure over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And we're going to go step by step weekly based on like, this is the stage one website. This is, we just need to get this up. We just need to get this thing. Like, this is the content type that we're writing. This is the sales psychology we're taking with this building. Then here's the technical thing. And then here's the next thing that we got to add on. And what you'll see is that it's an iterative process. And iterative means that you're just making a lot of small changes over time. And you'll see that there's always these adjustments that we're making, saying, did this work? Did this work? Okay, great. We need to add that. We need to expand on that, and which is very intimidating as a business owner when you don't know what these pathways are and what's important. So the goal is to say, hey, here's the why, here's what's important, here's how we're pulling it off, and here's the result over time that you can see. So that way, even though if you're not familiar with it, you can see as a case study where we put up significant risk as a business to make a case study out of ourselves from zero. So ultimately, we just want this to be empowering so that people say, nobody should ever say, I don't need a website. Nobody should ever say, I can't figure out the internet. I can't figure out how to make this work to the level that I want. And that's the whole goal of this series.
Yeah, and I love it. Where can they, because I know that you've already started. You launched, maybe a month ago, if that?
Yep.
So you've already started. Where do they get, where can they come watch that journey? Where can they join that journey? Is there a Facebook group, an Instagram group, somewhere that's just dedicated to watching Wazeter Inc. and specifically Wazeter.com go from nothing to this growth?
Yeah, so right now we rebuilt from scratch. So where we're at right now in the process is there's not a lot of social media pieces in. So go to Wazeter.com. That's Wazeter.com, and it'll be in the blog section. So you go to the blog, it'll pop up, it'll populate weekly on Fridays. The first episode is going to come out next Friday, which, encapsulates and go, well, so next Friday, depending on when you see this, we're talking, what's today? The 5th of November, 2020. So it's November 13th, 2020. Friday the 13th, we're launching. Maybe we'll do it on the 12th for superstitious. Maybe we'll change that one up. I didn't even realize that aligned that way.
Do it on the 13th, worst possible situation, and still be successful.
There we go. Yeah, I like it. We're gonna go with all the bad things in alignment.
All the bad things that could happen. Name an episode 666. Whatever you got to do.
I love it. People eat it up. So that episode will launch November 13th, 2020. It'll be the first episode. Obviously, the website's up right now because we're giving us the mercy of at least like a 2 to 3 week lead time, to be able to like produce and give a quality product. So if you want a sneak peek at things that are coming down the road, just keep looking at the website and you'll see. But the first breakdown is going to be November 13th, 2020, wazeter.com. So that's wazeter.com. You can search on Facebook for the same name, Wazeter, or you can Google search Wazeter, Wazeter, and it'll, have the spelling right there. And you'll find it. We've at least done pretty good at fairly quickly. So just in the first, week and a half of us getting back on our strategy, we've gone from 0 people viewing our site to 15 people viewing our site on a daily basis, which is a big deal. That's the first big thing is you need eyeballs. The first thing that matters is you need at least some people getting to the site for Google to have that social signal to say this is valuable. But we're going to cover all that stuff in detail later. So we've already made inroads. We've already made the things. There's already other blog posts up that you'll probably find extremely valuable, like how to navigate the election results, regardless of who wins as a business owner. So go follow, it'll be fantastic and it'll be something to go through. You'll be able to start seeing it on YouTube in the coming weeks. You'll start to see it on Facebook in the coming weeks. But we're following our strategy where we're starting from 0 again. We don't have any, you started with nothing in place. So we got to, rebuild it all.
Awesome. I love it. I'm curious. So this is kind of the final question here. And that is really what legacy are you building? So everybody, in my experience, they have some purpose to why they do what they do. Right? Some people love real estate, and it's not just because they love houses. They like what real estate provides for either income for themselves and the people they're coaching, or they like getting somebody who wasn't able to have a house into a house. For me, yes, I like helping people with their money, but I don't get excited about money. I get excited about the fact that the money is the fuel for your legacy, and the legacy is what I'm excited about. Like, why is this important to you? Why is it important for you to be wealthy? I had a client on a call yesterday, and like, oh man, am I putting the wrong things in my focus? Should I put more have more Christ-centered life instead of a money-centered life? And I was like, okay, well, let's just ask the question: why do you want money? Like, why are you getting money, right? So when you ask that question, well, why do you want money? It's so that I can be safe, secure, happy, whatever, all those things. Okay, why is that important to you? Well, because I want to be able to help other people. So there's a perception of what you're focused on is not a good-hearted reason to be focused on it. And there are some people that's actually their reason. They don't have any good reason to be focused on it. They just like money. But most people I know, they have a deeper reason. They have a reason why they do what they do. They have a reason for the legacy. I think you've touched on it a little bit, but in 6 generations from now, so this is like your great-great-great-great-grandchildren, what would you want them to be saying about what Frank Wazeter's life meant to them or to the world at large?
Oh, fundamentally, I'd probably say it comes down to one word phrase would be a relentless innovator. One of the things that I prize that it's extremely passionate about is I love all areas of business, and I love all areas. I'm the guy. I'll geek about accounting. I'll geek about the website stuff. I'll geek about the sales process and everything like that. And just I'm fascinated by seeing different ways that different people in different industries think and how they approach problems and how they solve for these things. And I love, creating the intersection of ideas to kind of come up with something new and unique and valuable that, nobody had ever really thought of in the context of certain industries. So, for me, the biggest thing that we want to do is we want to create market leaders. Like I don't want to do business with you if you don't have a vision to be, a market leader at least on the local level within your industry and your business. Because frankly, like if you're just being a market follower, you're just kind of looking to be, copy the next guy. And I just don't believe that that's a viable business strategy. So, I exclusively enjoy the company of people who have forward vision and forward, like they're doing something unique, powerful, creative. They're doing things differently. They're looking to always be growing and seeing how these things go through. And, and that doesn't necessarily need to be like in a tech context, like coming up with a better way to, coming up with a better pizza, or coming up with a better way to put on a roof, or coming up with like something that people would traditionally think of as quote unquote boring, but just maybe making the sales process more innovative. Like innovation is just so wide ranging and just so fascinating to me. So fundamentally, like the number one legacy would be like blazed a trail of where, everything that we touched, became market leaders, became innovators, became respected industry leaders. And, at the forefront, of that was just having this vision to navigate, myself and people around me through whatever circumstance came through, like whether it was like, a recession, whether it was through, good times, hard times, people were able to experience exponential growth and, thrive, because the single best vehicle for people to achieve most of what they want is through a business, is through owning a business, through having that business ownership. And to be able to expand on that just empowers you to live the life the way that you want to live. And the website to me is at the core of that. And that's the core business system that like just says, hey, this is a real entity. This is this system that's going to kind of go through it and place it. And it's at the key cornerstone of everything. So for me, that's what it comes down to, just relentless innovation, relentlessly doing things differently, being, that philosopher, that doer, that person who just guided the path for, hundreds and hundreds of these businesses to become, these multi-million dollars, these billion-dollar enterprises, through means that everybody kind of looks at and says, wow, we never thought that was possible in that industry or for that business or for that leader.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is absolutely applicable to every area of your life. The thing, I do this. I watch Disney movies with my boys every morning, pretty much every morning. I can't think, like 90% of the mornings. I wake up at 5 or 6, sometimes 7, depending on when my kids wake up. And I go downstairs and I watch Disney movies with my kids until my wife gets up. So it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours of Disney every morning. And it is fascinating. I love doing it because I get to see so many, like they have these concepts, and it's generally 2 or 3 seconds long, but these concepts of like, wow, that's something I need to apply in business. That's exactly how my people feel in business. And so they're movie clips that really, they do a really good job at depicting something, and it's completely unrelated, other than if we can take that thing that's memorable, a funny, humorous thing, and then put that into a business context and say, this is how you act, then it allows people to kind of laugh at themselves a little and say, okay, this is kind of ridiculous. I need to step up. So I think that's just one area where I choose innovation, doing my best to be looking for that when I watch movies, is how does this relate to life? But there's so many areas of combining progress or combining things that work in different industries and putting it into an industry that would never work, and seeing how quick it takes off. So I love that. Thank you so much, Frank, for coming on and just sharing your words of wisdom. I'm excited. I love seeing his updates for his website. So if you're not doing that, then you need to be. And again, it doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a 16-year-old kid. It doesn't matter. Like, it's $12 and you could be building yourself a presence about whatever you're doing. Like, it doesn't even have to be meaningful necessarily. As long as you're putting stuff out there, eventually gains traction. I had another client in my office and they're like, man, what am I going to do to make money? I was like, literally if you're struggling making money, it's because you just aren't trying. And that sounds like really harsh, but, and she didn't believe me when I told her this, so I had to YouTube it. But there's one guy, and they have a video of them eating food, 337 million views on this video. What do you think that the income they're getting off? They have a whole channel with millions of views, but just that one video, 137 million views. How much do you think they're making on just that video because people want to advertise on that video because it gets seen so much?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like literally. I mean, you gotta understand that we live in a unique era that's never happened in the history of mankind before, and that's where you literally have access to unlimited information about anything that you want to do, unlimited access to actually get any idea off the ground, and technically to start a business, all you need is the website, $12. And the idea, and to start pitching it to people. You don't need anything else. Like that's the core start. And so if you're sitting there saying, I don't know, or I don't have the information, or I don't have access to something like that, like somebody from the 50s, from the 70s, from the 80s would look at you and say, you're an idiot. Like you have access to like this little thing this is literally the Library of Alexandria. Like, do you know how many people throughout history would literally kill you and your entire family for access to a device that had literally access to the world's knowledge right here? Like everything else in the entire history of mankind was locked behind paywalls, locked behind, you had to like physically be in a place to go to the library and get access to information. Like you were talking about people treasuring like 1 or 2 books worth of information because they could get some perspective. And you can go download Audible and literally have like the entire like Amazon pantheon of knowledge. You can Google search anything. It's the Oracle of Delphi literally at your fingertips at all times. So it's kind of like if you're not taking advantage of that, it's your own damn fault. And, it's your own,
yeah.
You don't have anyone to blame. And my grandmother used to say, if you're bored, it's your own fault. And so like, if you're not knowledgeable, if you're bored, too is still applicable. It's your own fault. You literally have the entire resources of the world in a device that fits in your pocket. So empower yourself, like take that step and just, use like first time in history this is ever able to be done. Like this, anybody else in any generation ever would go to war over this. Like it would literally like wage a world war for this. And you have it in your pocket for like $50 a month, $70 a month, like whatever.
I mean, the reality is, you don't even have, you can get a phone and you don't even have to have service on it. You can go to a public Starbucks, connect to the Wi-Fi for free, and get all the information you need. Like, yeah. It's the creative. There's so many creative ways to get access. So I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing that with you. Get connected to him through wazeter.com and join that following, read his blogs, and start thinking, how can I be doing this as well? Because part of it is identifying, well, what should I put on here? He talks about that. How should I put it on here? How should I present it? What's a brand? Why is it a brand? What's the emotional part of the connection? All of that is on there, and you're going to want to, you're just going to want to be on there. Even if you have somebody else taking care of your website, most website developers, they only know how to do what you ask them to do. Or rather, they only do what you ask them to do. Maybe not that they don't know how to do more. They just are only going to do what you ask them to do. And so if you aren't the one directing that conversation, most of them aren't going to be directing it for you. So just think about that. And thank you so much. And we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.